The NBA draft ended as exciting as it started. Not really. Not exciting at all for us Sixers fans. The most exciting part was seeing a draft board, released to the public, leaked to the public. It is all Football Friday. It is the day after the draft, so we're going to try to mix a little bit of basketball into our all Football Friday talk. Trending in the AM here on Philadelphia Sports Network starts in 30 seconds.
Fourth and goal.
And a very good morning, everybody, and welcome to Trending in the AM right here on Philadelphia Sports Network. We're live, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, you know the drill. Like, share, retweet, follow. On all social media platforms, turn notifications on. I normally say shout it from the rooftops, but my wife that never listens told me she was eavesdropping, and she doesn't like my phrase, shout it from the rooftops. Tell everybody to tune into Trending in the AM. So I got to come up with a new tagline there in the morning. I'm your host, Phil Stiefel. I got my main man, Zach Ciavolella from Philadelphia Sports Network. We're here to talk today. Good morning, Zach. I know you're running on like 3 minutes of sleep right now.
Yeah, it was a late night. Obviously waiting to see what the Sixers would do. Multiple reports that they were going to be aggressive, that they were going to be buying into the second round. Obviously, it didn't turn out that way. And then, boom, right after the draft's done, a big wave of news for the Sixers. So it was a bit of a late night, but that's the life we chose, and we're moving.
Exactly, the life we chose, and it was a silent. I see a lot of people on the air like getting really worked up and upset that the Sixers were so silent. I keep telling people I know the draft board leak of the picks they wanted to trade up into the second round for. I know that was leaked, but realistically speaking, I didn't expect anything to happen last night. They were hamstrung. I saw some tweets of people with complete outrage when really, what did they really expect to do? Whether they traded up to get, a late second round pick or these 3 or 4 undrafted free agents they signed, that was best case scenario that could have happened last night. Oh. There you go.
Some technical issue. But what's really interesting is that in past seasons, it probably would have ended differently. Second round picks historically have not been valued overly heavily. We've seen that in the Sixers approach. They've been burning second round picks left and right, even for the opportunity to sign Daniel House for a deal that other teams would not have offered to pay him. So, right. There has been this historical lack of importance placed on second round picks under the new CBA that is absolutely looking to change. So this looks as not that anyone could exactly predict that this new CBA would be ratified this way, but it shows what happens when you are ill prepared, as the Sixers were. Now you don't really have. They have a New York Knicks second round pick in 2024.
Right.
Other than that, they don't have any second round picks until 2027.
Yep.
So it's a kind of a hole that they dug themselves into, and because of the new CBA rules and the new value placed on second round picks, teams are not going to be as willing to part with picks for cash as they have been in years back. There was a fine strategy for the past 50 years, but this is the first year where buying picks for cash was not going to be successful.
Right, and you said it perfectly. They're kind of stuck. You know what I mean? They kind of put themselves in this position with the draft picks, but they also did with the whole entire offseason. You think about it, like there's all these Tobias Harris rumors. There's this rumor, that rumor, all over the place. But really, until they make their decision, I brought this up yesterday on the show with everybody, until James Harden and Daryl Morey make a decision, it's really hard for them to make any other decisions on what to do, because the James Harden decision dictates which direction Daryl Morey goes in, with whether it's trading Tobias Harris for X, Y, or Z at this point. Do you think that that's fair, that the James Harden decision is holding everything up?
Yeah, I would say so. The one thing that I would say is the only factor I see trumping the James Harden decision would be the potential ability to acquire a superstar. If there is an actual superstar on the table, I do
Right.
think that the team will act in haste. And I don't say that as a negative. Obviously, with the opportunity to acquire a superstar with the limited assets the Sixers have, that is an avenue that they should potentially pursue. Uh, However, if you're not acquiring, one of the big names that we've heard might be available, you've all heard them. Uh, More than likely, James Harden is the kind of the tipping point for the offseason for the Sixers, really kind of where everything starts to kick off. Uh, you, he would be the supposed second star on the Sixers. You're going to be potentially building your team around him and Joel Embiid. So, and especially financially, you really need to know where you're at as a team. So, I think that's absolutely true. That's going to be the, really primary catalyst for other moves once that move is made.
We'll get back to those other moves in a second that could be made and stuff. I have a couple interesting points on that, but we got TKO Taylor saying that he was upset till he saw some of those two-way deals, and Adam's asking about these guys that they brought in. I know you stayed up late last night. You wrote the article on Philadelphia Sports Network breaking them down. You got I can't even say some of these names: Azulis Tubelis. I don't know if I said that right. Turkovan Smith and Ricky Council. That one's easy. What are the Sixers getting with these three guys?
Yeah, so and there's actually a fourth as well. So there's Marcus Bagley,
Right.
brother of Marvin Bagley, is actually going to be on an Exhibit 10. So he's not signing a two-way like the other guys. That report comes to us via Billy Voice's Kyle Newbeck. It's actually really interesting because both Ricky Council and Taquavion Smith were projected to be selected somewhere in the mid-second round. And that's as recent as right before the draft. Taquavion Smith was even thought about potentially as a first-round pick. Last year, he was expected to be a first-round pick. He's a very explosive guard out of North Carolina State. He is extremely confident. You never have to worry about his confidence. The issue is that his shot isn't exactly there. So if that's something that can kind of be rounded into form in a lesser role, you hope and expect that it could be. You're looking at a guy who potentially could provide a spark off an NBA bench for some time to come. So Taquavion Smith is I would think the most interesting, at least to me, of the three that they did sign to two-way contracts. That being said, Ricky Council is also an extremely interesting player because he's got an NBA ready body. He's already a freak athlete as well. Watch some of his highlight film from Arkansas. It's you look at that and you will already be in the mood to buy Blue Coats tickets right after that because that man can fly. And he's going to be just a pleasure to watch. The issue with him again is the shot. He shot very poorly. I would say under 30% from three at Arkansas, but that's something that again you hope can kind of work and round into shape. His form is not as poor as his shooting numbers would suggest, so that leads you to believe that there is the potential for him to improve that in the future. But he's absolutely an interesting prospect. And then Azulis Tubelis, I gotta say, like that I think that the projection for him, the expectation for him is lower than the other two prospects. He might have the most interesting skill set of the three that signed two-way deals, though. He's kind of a stretch four out of Arizona. But he has a lot of like wing tendencies, and what I mean by that is like an elevated ability handling the ball compared to most players his size. He's 6'11". He was very efficient in the transition game, specifically throwing outlet passes and running transition offense. There is the kind of like a baby Sabonis aspect to him, Domantas Sabonis for the Kings. Will he ever reach those heights? Like that's asking for a lot, obviously. But to have a player of at least somewhat similar an archetype taking on as little risk as signing him as an undrafted free agent. There's interesting players abundant in this Sixers undrafted class, I should say, and even to get back on to Marcus Bagley, he kind of like his brother is extremely raw and has kind of an issue putting it all together on the court, but he is extremely athletic, if nothing else. So there is at least that baseline where hopefully you can kind of coach up some of those skills around the peripheral. He's a bit more of a general forward than a big like his brother Marvin is, but really an opportunity to at least cultivate an athlete and see what you have in Marcus Bagley. So I think all the way around, it's interesting. It's going to be a fun summer league. It's going to be a fun season for the Bluecoats.
Right.
If I had to, put money on one of these guys actually registering minutes for the Sixers this season, it'd be Ricky Council.
Okay. Yeah, and of course, and Taylor's saying, there's obviously this hope around the Sixers with Nick Nurse that his specialty is developing. So maybe, maybe we do get something out of these players and some of the other young players that are hopefully going to be brought back here. Obviously, Springer's under contract. Hopefully, McDaniel sticks around. I haven't figured out how they're going to keep Paul Reed yet, but if they can find a way to keep Paul Reed too. So the Nick Nurse element of these undrafted free agents kind of is at least intriguing Sixers fans on a very quiet NBA draft night.
Yeah, no, I think it's definitely something to watch, and it's important to think about that. Rico Hines is also coaching with the Sixers under Nick Nurse's staff. He's another talented player development coach. When you talk about Paul Reed, he's actually the reportedly most widely expected free agent to return, at least outside of James Harden. And it's something that really seems to be important to Reed and also to the Sixers. Basically, from what I've heard, barring a starting role elsewhere.
Obviously, let me ask you that, because I keep telling people, I see Paul Reed. I want Paul Reed. Everybody wants Paul Reed here, but the thing is, doesn't he want an opportunity to start somewhere? And you see the way these mid-level teams and lower-level teams, they got money to spend. You got to think that some team out there sees the potential in him and would we're tight. We can offer him and match contracts, but if a team comes out there and offers him a 3-year, $8 or $9 million a year deal, how can the Sixers even compete with that at this point?
Yeah, I think that kind of situation would be certainly challenging for the Sixers. I wouldn't say that I necessarily expect that to happen. Even when you look at some of these lower level teams, some of them already kind of have their guys in place that they want to see how they're going to progress. I mean, you look at Detroit and they just have a wealth of bigs that they're kind of working their way through. Charlotte is so enamored with Mark Williams, and understandably so. Houston has Alperen Şengün, who they're still trying to figure out what they have in him, who I'm actually a fan of, even though he seems to get a little bit of disrespect, from that Houston area from time to time. There's a lot of players already in place, and the thing is that Paul Reed, while I think he does have the potential to spend some time at the floor, he is not ready to do that in a starting role. So a team's not going to bring him on to start at power forward. If they bring him on, he's going to be the starting center. And as far as how many of those positions are open, I don't think there's one for Paul Reed, which works out well for the Sixers. And I think it works out well for Paul Reed too, because he's absolutely beloved in the city. Right. I think that under Nick Nurse and Rico Hines, he's going to have a huge opportunity to develop. And with Philippe Petrushev coming over, potentially, more than likely, seen with the reports, there's going to be, I think, an opportunity for Reed to develop more as a four, which I think will be great for his career.
That's interesting. All right, real quick, before we get into some football talk, because it is all football Friday. I know, Mad Chatter, you're always waiting for the football talk, but we will just talk real quickly here. Obviously, Wembanyama went 1 overall in the NBA draft as expected. I guess the first big question was Brandon Miller going to go or Scoot Henderson at number 2. Brandon Miller obviously went number 2 to the Hornets there. Mad Chatter asking, what are your thoughts on Brad Miller? I guess more so Brad Miller versus Scoot Henderson, because that was the first question. And then the other part of the draft that really surprised a lot of people was how far Whitmore fell. What was it, all the way to 20 to Houston? They were really the big questions / shockers of last night.
Yeah. So to address Brandon Miller first, is he good? I don't expect him to be like Michael Kidd Gilchrist, and a bust, per se of a pick. He has a quality NBA player archetype, real two-way potential. The opportunity to be a quality shooter in the league. Um, he can score. He's a strong defender. He's a fluid athlete. When you look at some of these guys who have been busts at that second pick before, we talk about, again, I already mentioned Michael Gilchrist, James Weissman's a potential name to mention. Philadelphia members Evan Turner. A lot of these players have major holes in their game. He's not exactly that. Brandon Miller is, I think, going to be a good player. He may very well end up being top 10, maybe even a top 5 player in this draft. The issue is that myself personally, I would have drafted Scoot Henderson. Now they have LaMelo Ball, and obviously that seems to be what kind of gave them some pause. I would have figured it out. Charlotte's not in a position to not draft the best player available, and by a wide margin, I believe Scoot Henderson was the better player. The one other thing I'll say about Charlotte drafting Brandon Miller, go and listen to what Mitch Kupchak, the general manager of the Hornets, said about his drafting, and you will have no confidence in this selection by the Charlotte Hornets. It is terrifying for Hornets fans. That being said, I do think he is going to be a good.
That does not sound like a very positive reinforcement there for Charlotte fans right now.
It will really make you appreciative of your team. I'll tell you that. But I did want to touch on
Daryl Morey. It would make you appreciative of Daryl Morey.
Oh, for sure. I mean, the thing is, Daryl Morey, not that he's not without his faults. Everybody has their own, obviously. And that being said, you look at Daryl Morey's history, specifically with the Sixers, and while there's probably, a move or two that I think certain people would have done a different way, you have to still consider all the good that he has done, getting off of Al Horford, turning Ben Simmons into James Harden. And I know Harden is frustrating at the moment, but imagine if Ben Simmons was still on the team, how frustrated Sixers fans would be. So on and so forth. Bringing in DeAnthony Melton, which has become an underrated talking point for Morey's history with the Sixers. So absolutely make you appreciate Daryl Morey. I think that most teams should be a lot more appreciative of their GM after hearing his comments. That's partly what happens when your majority owner, who is selling the team, still for some reason makes the selection at 2. So it was an interesting night for Charlotte. They had a better draft after that. But the other thing, when we talk about players, you mentioned Cam Whitmore. Mm-hmm. So he slid to 20. He was talked about being drafted to the Houston Rockets even at 4, against Amen Thompson. And a lot of people were, hey, what's going on with Whitmore? What's going on? Obviously, reports came out that he didn't have a great personal workout with teams, individual workout with teams. And then additionally, there was a medical red flag. And the word that I have heard, and I do not say this lightly, was I heard the word degenerative used in regard to his knee condition. Okay. Hopefully that is not the case. Personally, I am a fan of Whitmore's potential. I think that he could very well be as exciting of a player, similar to the mold of like a Miles Bridges of sorts. So I wish him well. I wish him a speedy recovery, and that this knee injury never plagues him again. It did allow him to slip to 20. I think the Houston Rockets are pretty happy with that. Yeah. I think that Cam is actually happy to play for the Rockets. It's going to be a little touch and go at first, and we'll see what happens in the long term with his injury. But that's the primary reason for that fall.
That's good. That's just interesting because that was literally the most interesting part. As a Sixers fan with no picks, nothing going on, like the most interesting part of the first round of the draft was how far will Cam fall? And
oh, sure,
that was the only thing we were really. At that point, that was the only thing I was paying attention to at that point. Real quick, Wembanyama. Real quick thoughts. Do you think he lives up to the hype? Because man, I feel like a strong gust of wind, man, is going to knock that guy over. And I know they were breaking down how great his core was, on the broadcast last night. But man, there's a lot of hype and a lot of pressure on that young kid right there.
Well, I'll start by saying this. Not even LeBron James lived up to the hype, and he's the second greatest basketball player in the history of the game. Uh, it is impossible to live up to the hype that people have placed on Victor Wembanyama. However, is he going to be damn close to it? I think so. He is a little bit on the thin side, obviously.
He's young. His body
There's
hasn't fully developed yet.
exactly. There over time, he's going to. I don't know how much in terms of mass he's going to put on, and I wouldn't advise that he does either.
Right.
I do think that he looks to kind of cultivate functional strength over his years in the league, and continuing to work with professional teams as he has. That will certainly help as his body ages. That'll certainly help as well. He's not going to end up looking like Joel Embiid.
No.
But that being said, I don't think that he's necessarily going to be a Manute Bol either. I think that there is a very happy medium that he will find. He may actually play the four for most of his career with San Antonio, even though many had him as a center coming out of France. But he he's one of the most impressive guys that I've watched. I mean, you look at him; he looks like an absolute pro. There are so many prospects coming into the league that already look like pros. But I mean, man, like, you look at him, you look at how Luka Doncic was before he came on in. I mean, you talk; these are dudes that are gonna, and Doncic already has light the league on fire.
Right.
So it's a very great pick for San Antonio.
Absolutely.
They very lucky for San Antonio to once again land the number one pick and land a player who grew up a Spurs fan, and quite the lucky scenario. But Victor Wembanyama is going to be a great player for San Antonio for years to come.
I was going to move on, but then the TKO Taylor's comment here about Tobias, and then we got to move on. Boston possibly got better. We really didn't get into it. I had a question and I haven't asked it yet, so we're just going to get right into it now. And that's, I've been talking a lot on the show over the last couple of weeks. Like, when is Tobias Harris's, a trade of his most valuable? Before the draft, after the draft, at the trade deadline, whatever. But we've seen now multiple really big trades go down over the last couple of weeks. Obviously, Bradley Beal to the Suns, the Kristaps Porzingis trade with Marcus Smart, and then Chris Paul going to the Clippers yesterday, or not the Golden State Warriors yesterday for Jordan Poole. And when I'm looking at all these trades, these big names that are floating around, like, I see the value like fluctuating a lot. Like, some trades seem like really big, and some like they're just dumping them off. And I think it has a lot to do with the new CBA and a lot of different stuff like that. I can't get in my mind now what a realistic return for Tobias Harris is, because some of these trades I'm like, well, maybe we can actually get more for Harris than we realized. And then you see some of these other trades, you're like, you're not going to get a second round pick for him because of the way things are working out. Where do you think his value has fallen now after seeing some of these big trades?
Well, Keith Pompey released an article a couple of days ago that spoke about the Sixers rumored trade talks with other teams,
Detroit,
specifically
Cleveland.
Detroit, Cleveland, Indiana, and the prevailing feeling was that the Sixers were overvaluing Harris, and I think that they have every right to at this stage, because the honest fact of it is, at this point in time, they do not have to trade Tobias Harris, which works in the Sixers' favor. I do think that the big shoe to watch is what happens in Portland with Damian Lillard. After selecting Scoot Henderson with the third pick, they made it very clear that he was looking to add veterans to the team. He was not looking for a youth movement in Portland. They went ahead and they made the third pick anyway, which I'm not saying was the wrong move by Portland. However, according to reports, they have not spoken to Dame since, which, we're like 12 hours removed from the pick, basically. So it's not the biggest of deals. But Lillard is reportedly looking to take the next week or so to consider his place with Portland. There is it's sometime in July. I want to say possibly the 19th is the anniversary of him signing his Supermax deal with the Blazers. He has to wait until that point until he actually can be traded. So definitely something to watch on the Damian Lillard market, and that could tie hand in hand with Tobias Harris, of course. As the name Paul George has come up, not with the Sixers front office necessarily, but yeah, obviously, a lot of
I
people.
put a lot out there on I put a lot out for Paul George. I put a lot out for Kawhi Leonard. Look,
Yep.
I have gotten crushed now for weeks because I suggest one thing. My goal would be a pause year.
Yeah.
Just let everything play out. No rash decisions. They don't like that. I'm like, let's make this bowl trade. They don't like that. So I bring up this bowl trade. Nobody likes it. Like, nobody can make up their mind what they want the Sixers to do.
Yeah, and I think that the Sixers are going to take their own time, take a good amount of time to actually figure it out because they're not going to rush this. They understand the importance of adding a player right now. They're not even necessarily in a rush to sign James Harden because the race is down to Houston and Philadelphia. And as far as who has the edge in the waiting game, I would say it's Philadelphia because Houston's going to have to act right around the beginning of free agency, right around July 1st, because they have a ton of cap space, but they're going to have to act if they do want some of these other good players on the free agency market. So when we talk about what is Tobias Harris's trade value, it's actually, I think, higher than people expect in some ways and lower in others. So you mentioned draft picks. I don't think it's very high in terms of draft capital. Where I do think that it is high is as potential salary filler in a Damian Lillard trade or theoretically a Paul George trade. And in addition to that, in a deal that would take on quote unquote bad salary to the Sixers. So a couple names just off the top of my head, after trading away Davis Bertans, I don't know how interested Dallas would be in this.
I have put a few Dallas trades together on the show, but all of them included Bertans' salary to, we get a player like Reggie Bullock, to start.
Yeah.
And then you get Bertans to fill out the salary. Now they don't have that salary. So that kind of throws a loop, but I don't even know what Dallas is doing at this point. So
I mean, a guy like Tim Hardaway Jr. is still on a big enough contract that you think something can possibly happen, but it's kind of those guys, who are making that kind of 15 to 30 million on multiple years. That's where he has value.
Yep, absolutely agree with you on that. I think, and Mitch, thanks for coming in this morning. Make sure everybody's liking this video. Yesterday we got over 20 likes on this video. We're only at 8, guys. Come on. Comments, roll them in. We're going to switch to football in 1 second. I just want to end it with the draft board. I think people are making it a little bit overreaction there. It's not like there was any names on this board. I don't know. People are saying they could read the second board. I zoomed in as close as I could. I couldn't even read that board. Relax, guys. The draft board leak picture means literally nothing. Am I right?
I would say for the most part it means nothing. I don't think the Sixers are particularly happy that it got out there. From what I heard, an individual sent it, to one of the hosts of just a funny pathway, to one of the hosts of the Rights to Ricky Sanchez podcast, who sent it to Kyle Neubeck, who verified it with the Sixers, and it turned out that yes, it was legitimate. So it is a comedy of errors to watch that. As far as the draft board itself, again, I didn't list any players. It just listed. I mean, second round picks for cash is first of all that's that's got to be a fantasy team name next season, or a new podcast name or something.
I'm new to PSN. Is there a PSN fantasy league that I can get into?
We might have a basketball one next year. We're looking to grow the football. We're in the midst of a heavy baseball fantasy season, but we'll get the fantasy football and possibly fantasy basketball up in a few months. But as far as the second board, again, I wouldn't read too much into it. Particularly because it looked as though it was under the assumption that the Sixers would be running a 3-guard lineup, which is not expected for them to do consistently. I don't really see a situation where they bench PJ Tucker and start DeAnthony Melton along with James Harden and Tyrese Maxey. It's I don't know. It is what it is. It has
on PJ Tucker in the comment section right now. I mean, I don't know. I think
the Sixers' problem last season wasn't PJ Tucker. Like, I'll be flat honest with you. He
did his job.
Yeah, he did exactly what he was there for. Other guys didn't. You can have that PJ Tucker, that Danny Green guy in the lineup.
Right.
You just really need other players to do their job. So it's going to be interesting to see what. And I'm not entirely against Tucker off the bench. It's just with the roster as currently constructed, there is not a lineup that is better, has starter potential than one that has PJ Tucker in it. So
And honestly,
I'm not overly worried about the draft.
His value with the team once we got to the playoffs. I know it was a short run in the playoffs, but his value did show in the playoffs for sure. His leadership.
Yeah.
Now, if a team called and offered a trade, that was a valuable trade or a viable trade, yeah, I would consider it. But he's the last decision that has to be made, in my opinion. You know what I mean? So it's not important whatsoever to worry about him right now.
Mind you, he was one of the top performers, at least in that first half of Game 7 against Boston.
Absolutely.
So again, he's not the issue.
No, and we always claim we don't have enough of those tough, hard-nosed guys.
Yeah, exactly.
Whatever. Yeah. And everybody wants to get rid of the one we have. I complained about him plenty, guys, but I'm not ready to move on from him just yet. All right, let's transition. I mean, I know we got some football talk here. Man, Chatter, already your opinion on the Bills, because that's all he ever wants to talk about is his Buffalo Bills on this show. He wants to know how much the Buffalo Bills will win the Super Bowl by. Chatter, they ain't winning the Super Bowl. They might not even make the Super Bowl at this point, because the Eagles are going to make it again, and they're going to be playing probably Kansas City again this year. We got more PJ Tucker comments coming in. Great locker room guy. Want him on the team. But he is older than dirt. But watch what you say about age, Judd, because I'm older than PJ Tucker. Just so you know, I am older than him, 100%. We'll get to Buffalo in a second. We can touch on Chatter's comment in a second. But we got Eagles. And we keep talking about the Sixers offseason, moves they got to be made. When the Eagles offseason's still technically going on, and the Eagles still, we spent a lot of time talking about holes on this team and, the big names. We're always talking about Budda Baker or DeAndre Hopkins or Dalvin Cook. I saw somebody else tweeting about Dalvin Cook again the other day. And while the offseason's never over till week 1 starts, it's not even over after week 1. Howie's always making moves. Mike Greger, one of the other writers of the Network, put out an interesting article yesterday with 5 moves he'd like to see the team make, or 5 free agents that can help the team not name the big stars. And I don't know if you read that article, Zach, or not. But that article really struck me because we're always so focused on, we need another wide receiver, in my opinion. I really, truly believe that. But DeAndre Hopkins isn't the only guy out there. And he wrote about Jarvis Landry, a guy that I've talked about. Are there any secondary free agents still available out there for the Eagles that you'd like to see them bring in instead of going for these super big names that are the household names that everybody wants?
Yeah, well, I mean, first and foremost, I think that's more likely to be the path that the Sixers go down is targeting, one of those lesser known names. And what I actually appreciated about Mike's article was that it kind of walked the line between, some of those really kind of, I don't want to say lower level because that almost sounds insulting, but more easy to acquire guys like Jarvis Landry. And then it also talked about guys like Jeremy Chin, who aren't Budda Baker, but, would still be extremely good acquisitions, interesting acquisitions for Philadelphia. And Chin, many expected to be an Eagle until the Eagles drafted Jalen Hurts, which obviously worked out very well for Philadelphia. But I think that there is still kind of
that was the Jalen Hurts draft. I didn't look it up, but I do remember on draft night, whatever year it was, tweeting nonstop, hoping that Jeremy Chin was an Eagle.
That was the only thing I actually, and this is going to sound, however it sounds, and I don't really care. I was very happy at the Jalen Hurts draft pick. The only issue that I had was that it wasn't Jeremy Chin. That was my personal issue because I was such a big Jeremy Chin guy. But that being said, Jarvis Landry isn't necessarily a name that invokes a ton of interest from me, just given his age, his injury history, and as far as the free agent market, I'll be honest, I haven't taken a great look at it recently, but not that I can really think of as far as guys who are available. Though there's always depth moves. Mike mentioned DJ Fluker, who's a guy who could potentially be added on.
I guess the talking point then really is do the Eagles need to go make so I agree with Mike's article. He mentioned wide receiver, linebacker, safety. He also mentioned offensive line, which I think is an underrated need still for some depth on this team. I agree with the positions that he's talking about. I also think they need a backup tight end, a better tight end 2 option in my opinion. But that notwithstanding, these are all positions still in need. And I know there's a lot of hype for this Eagles team. There's a lot of positivity going forward. of this team, but they still can get better at this point. And I kind of feel like, look, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, whatever you have to say about him, whatever. He was out chirping again yesterday on Twitter. That kid just needs to put social media away. But that move wasn't made till late August. So, there's still moves to be made. I'm just not sure whether I want the Eagles making the bigger move for a Budda Baker or a DeAndre Hopkins or whatnot, or these secondary moves. I'm not sure what's smarter path to take for Howie Roseman at this point to really improve his team, lock in that another Super Bowl run this year.
Well, a couple things. Again, you mentioned Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, which is a very interesting comparison because again, the need for the Eagles is safety.
Right.
We've talked about Budda Baker, we've talked about Jeremy Chin. I would say that if I do expect anything, it would be a move for a safety through the trade market, not through free agency, obviously. So could you see something somewhat similar? I do think so. The Eagles have a bevy of picks next year, specifically with the comp picks as well. So the opportunity is there to invest some draft assets into acquiring a strong caliber safety. Mm-hmm. I would expect the team to target more of a Jeremy Chin than a Budda Baker, unless Budda is shockingly available. And by that, I mean in terms of price. So, we'll see what exactly happens there. You mentioned the offensive line concerns. Another veteran wouldn't be awful by any means. The one name, though, I guess you could say of all the available free agents who I have the most interest in, and the kind of catch-22 of it all is that there actually is already a lot of depth in this general position. But if they find a way to add Yannick Ngakoue, I think that's just it's been a name Eagles fans have been excited about for years.
Yeah, you can never have too much defensive line help. Like you just never can.
You can't, and even if they don't add a guy, you somewhat expect them to kind of make a Robert Quinn level move by the deadline. But if you can put out there with Hassan Reddick, out there Josh Sweat, Brandon Graham, who I do expect to kick in on the inside a little bit more, excuse me, than he did last year. Obviously the additions that the team has made, in the draft, there's it's going to be an insanely talented line. Mm-hmm. I would feel even better having Yannick Ngakoue there, if for nothing less, just for that injury concern.
It would just shut up. Excuse me, I'm coughing too. It would shut up those Cowboys fans because I got into it last night with a Cowboys podcaster on Twitter because he was saying that the gap has shrunk so much between the Cowboys and the Eagles, and where they are in the league in the division. I'm like, maybe a little bit, but he's like, no. The loss of Javon Hargrave means you guys have fallen he thinks the Eagles fell off a cliff because of Hargrave. At least a big name like that scare and the fear back into those Cowboys fans.
Yeah, I mean, listen, Javon Hargrave, was he a very good player in Philadelphia? Yes, he was, but he had his faults as well. He was not a strong run defender, which 49ers fans will very quickly find out. So you could even argue that it's aside from the addition of Jalen Carter, who's going to be an absolute monster, for the run defense, you can almost say that it's almost addition by subtraction there. But when you look at
Milton Williams.
Listen, Milton Williams, I've been since his rookie season, I've been a big fan of. I do think that he's going to take a moderate leap. Jordan Davis is going to play a lot more than he did last year. That's the biggest boost towards the Eagles' run defense. So when you look at kind of losses like that, I'm not overly concerned based on what the Eagles did do. Again, I wouldn't hate if they went ahead and made another addition on the outside, for the pass rush. Because again, Hassan Reddick, Nolan Smith, Brandon Graham, Josh Sweat, that's very good. You get another name like Yannick Ngakoue, I feel a lot better. And then if you wanted to add another linebacker, another kind of run defender, that's an option for you, kind of like a specialist there. So as far as names with that, I mean, Zach Cunningham is a guy that is a solid run defender even at this stage in his career, but he can't cover a pass for his life. That's the issue. And then the other name outside of there is Deion Jones, who was fine with Cleveland last year after being traded from Atlanta. He's clearly on the down end of his career, but at this point, you're not exactly you're kind of bargain shopping through free agents.
Right.
So when you kind of look at that, I think that they can do more to solidify the run defense outside of the defensive tackle position. Though Graham and Josh Sweat, I think, will be fine as run defenders. But there's not a ton of holes. I mean, that's the thing,
Right.
is that people look at the safety spot and they're thinking, this team, they still need a little bit of work done. And it's like, yeah, you can have a little more depth of the pass rusher. Yeah, you definitely want at least one more starting caliber safety, hopefully above that. But even when you talk about like wide receiver 3, the team is still high on Kez Watkins. Olamide Zaccheaus is, I think, actually a quality option to be that third wide receiver. There's going to be guys who are cut between now and the start of the season who you could potentially look into. I mean, really, if you're talking about one concern outside of the safety, which I do think that they're going to address, I have to agree with you that adding some veteran depth in the offensive line would just make me feel better, because when you're looking at assumptively Cam Jurgens starting at guard, which is not certain, your depth is looking like Brett Tope, Suopeta, Tyler Steen, and Jack Driscoll, and there's exciting youth, but a real veteran offensive lineman would go a long way.
Yeah, you got to think about it. I mean, it's not that long removed from 2020 when we had like 87 starting configurations. And if Lane Johnson misses a few games, which he tends to do, at some point, Jason Kelce will miss a game. I don't know when it'll be, but at some point he will. I don't know. Where are you on that Cam Jurgens at guard versus staying the backup center? Because Steen could obviously step in and start right away at guard, but yet everybody seems to be pushing for Cam Jurgens. I'm on the camp that I'd rather keep Cam Jurgens as that backup center, keep learning, keep growing in that role, so that if something comes along to Jason Kelce, that you could slide him over there.
Yeah, I mean, Steen, I'm always a little bit hesitant to plug for the most part, a rookie into the offensive line when you are a team as competitive as the Eagles are. Obviously, recently, they did that without too much of an issue, with Landon Dickerson taking on a starting role very early on in his career. That being said, I don't think that Steen is exactly Landon Dickerson. And it's also a situation where you have to remember that he is kind of a coming out of college, a fluid player between tackle and guard. Will play guard at the NFL level, I firmly believe. I am not against trying things out with Cam Jurgens at guard. However, I would say the leash is not overly long. You don't want to mess with the chemistry a lot during the season, but at the same time, I think that this should be an ongoing competition even into the first few weeks of the actual season.
Okay. I mean, I'm fine with that as well. I think whoever you put there will do fine. I mean, you'll have Lane Johnson on one side, Jason Kelce on the other side. So you got two of the greatest of all time, on each side.
Definitely makes it a lot easier.
It makes it a lot easier to like grow into a new role when you've got two Hall of Famers on each side of you. So, that being said, still though, I mean, Lane Johnson misses time, you know what I mean? And Dickerson misses, plays, and Jordan Mailata misses plays. We just don't have that depth. I only find like depth issues in certain spots. I mean, TKO Taylor saying, what if AJ or Devontae go down? Saying we're okay at wide receiver. I think it's a fair fear, because then you have Quez Watkins or OZ stepping into that, backup role. And who's your fifth wide receiver? Britton Covey at this point? I mean, like, I still think that fifth wide receiver, I don't think you need to go out and go spend big on DeAndre Hopkins, but you definitely got to find a veteran. And I feel like we've been talking about Jarvis Landry for 3 years now. So there might be a better option for Jarvis Landry, eventually down the line. But I think it's a fear of mine. Just like I've been talking on the show nonstop about the fear if Dallas Goedert goes down again. He's missed 5 games, 2 of the last 3 seasons. Like, I don't know about Dan Arnold and Jack Stoll filling in again at that backup tight end spot.
Yeah, I think that Dan Arnold, listen, I'm not expecting him to set the world on fire. Do I think that he can be serviceable in that situation? I do. Jack Stoll is a guy who's grown tremendously as a tight end. I wouldn't say that he's ready to be a T1 at this point. However, if he's going to fill in for Goddard, for a game or two based on injury, I'm definitely okay with that. He has a nice, well-rounded game. The benefit for the Eagles in regards to their lack of tight end depth is that the team is so top heavy at wide receiver, and it has so many weapons readily available at running back. And Jalen Hurts is such a viable two-way, two-threat quarterback that it's not the biggest of issues. Like, obviously you want to have, all pro players at every position at all times, but if the team has to run with like a Jack Stoll for like 3-4 weeks, or even a Dan Arnold, I feel confident in that. I think that Nick Sirianni and the staff will be able to coach the team up as needed, and just with Jalen Hurts at the helm, you have to feel confident.
I would love to know your thoughts on Jalen. It's obviously super huge season. We've talked about it a couple times now on this show on, what's supposed to be an all football Friday. It's a partial football Friday today with the draft. But we've talked about a lot of things with Jalen Hurts, his progression, how, he took such a big jump from 2021 to 2022. Everyone's worried about what that jump from 2022 to 2023 is going to be like. And that whether he stays the same, he falls back a little bit, he regresses a little bit. But no one's actually talking about what can he actually do to actually get better. And it was something that popped into my head yesterday, we're worried about him regressing. Well, what if he actually gets better, and what could he do to get better? And that's something that's been percolating around my head for the last 24 hours. Is it the deep ball, which I already think he throws a really good deep ball? I think it's maybe reading the middle of the field when it's his first read. Maybe that's what it is. What are your thoughts on what Jalen Hurts can actually do to get better and not stay the same or regress, as we keep talking about all offseason?
Yeah, when you're talking about Jalen Hurts potentially regressing, and this is
the question right as you're asking it too.
This may sound somewhat bold considering how well he played last year. I really don't see Jalen Hurts regressing as much of a worrisome concern. I do expect him to improve off of last season, which sounds crazy to say. He was already so good, but I think it is far more likely that he improves. I think that it's more likely that he more likely than he regresses, that he stays about where he's at. And I don't think it's very likely that he regresses. What I would like to see from Hurts is to make sure he's taking care of his body a little bit more. And what I mean is just avoiding putting it in harm's way. He is far stronger than some of the mobile quarterbacks that we've seen in the past. People will always in some way compare him even to like a Michael Vick, and just in so many ways, these guys are completely different, Vick and Hurts. So I while I'm not worried at every hit watching Jalen Hurts, at the same time, you don't want that to kind of wear down over time. You want him to somewhat preserve his body, never at the risk of not winning games, but you see him, especially in goal line situations. I mean, he's putting, all that squat work to play there, trying to force his way into the end zone. But when you're closer to the 50-yard line than the end zone, it's okay to run out of bounds. It's okay to slide, feet first. So that's one thing that I would like to see a little bit more from him. And then I actually agree with you, working in the middle of the field a little bit more, putting your players in a little bit of a better position to earn some yak yardage. I think especially Devonta Smith, I think has a real untapped ability to do so, or area to potentially improve in that where Hurts can, and part of it's on Sirianni in the offense as well, to call the game in a manner that opens him up in that fashion. Hurts is fantastic at finding his man, and on the deep ball he can get him wide open to bust it all the way to the end zone, but kind of more in the intermediate range, short game, even on crossing routes, I'd like to see him be able to place that ball in a little bit of a way that the receiver doesn't have to commit to catching as opposed to gaining additional yardage, and also doesn't have to immediately head out of bounds. So focusing on allowing or positioning the ball to encourage yak yardage and just protecting his body are the two biggest things that I'm looking for this season.
I think a lot of the protecting of his body also is. I mean, last week's show was titled "Fears." Eagles fears for 23. And one of the fears to me is, Brian Johnson taking over. I love Brian Johnson. Don't get me wrong. And I think him and Hurts already have a connection. I think it was the right hire, but he's got to call plays for the first time. And I think this season protecting Hurts is going to fall on the coordinator and the play calling to, like, what's he had? Well over 700 yards his last 2 full years.
Yeah.
And I don't want to see Jalen Hurts have 700 rushing yards. I don't want to see the games where he's got 18 rushes anymore, 10 or 12 of them designed runs. I want to see him under 500 yards rushing. You can't take the running element away from him. That would be like, hamstringing, one of his best assets, but you can protect him by calling less of those designed runs on a weekly basis.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I don't really care too much about his yardage in general. It's more so, how do those plays end? Do they end with him running out of bounds? Do they end with a defender on top of him? That's what I really want to avoid, and I would encourage fewer designed runs. I do think that's a very valid point, but part of the reason I would do so is to let him shine as a passer. He's really grown as a pocket quarterback, and has a great ability to throw on the run as well. Lean into that. Like, obviously it's great that he is up there with Lamar Jackson as the best dual threat quarterbacks in the league. However, you have a guy who is more than capable of winning games with his arm. So
absolutely,
show that off. That's what I would like to see as well this upcoming season.
I mean, honestly, at this point, he threw for about 3,700 yards. It was last year, right? Over 15 games, per game, like whatever that works out to. Like, I could see him throwing for over 4,000 yards if he played 15 games. Like, I think he's got 4,300 yard, over a 15 game stretch type, potential if he leans away from those run plays as much as he does.
Yeah, no, I think that's definitely fair to say. And, it's going to be a really interesting year because we could watch the ascension all the way up to potentially as high as the top 2 quarterback. I'm not guaranteeing that's going to happen, but
I love all the Josh Allen comments and the Buffalo comments. And it was like a year ago where we were trying to compare Jalen Hurts' ascension to what Josh Allen was doing, not, physical talent, but whatever. Now, everybody said those conversations were crazy. Now, Jalen Hurts chatter might actually be better than Josh Allen at this point. And actually, obviously, the Eagles are a better team overall than Buffalo. So, those conversations weren't as crazy looking back as they seem.
No, not at all.
I'm guessing this is someone related to you, Zach. Lewis, maybe your father. That. We never got to Nakobe Dean, but there was a lot of Reed Blankenship comments earlier as well. And Reed Blankenship and Nakobe Dean are those guys that on the defense that are going to have to step up, big time. Let's just phrase both in the same conversation. Is there somebody, either or Dean or Blankenship, you have more confidence in at this point, stepping up in what they're going to have a very big role this year?
Yeah, I would say as far as confidence level, it's a bit higher in Dean at this point in time. He's had basically a full season to kind of study and work in the lab and kind of put everything together. Is he? I do think he's going to somewhat look like a rookie of the season. So don't go out there expecting to see an All-Pro Nakobe Dean's first season. That being said, that I think that he is going to be a quality starting linebacker. I think he's going to be able to play well off of Nicholas Morrow as well. I think that tandem is going to be really a capable one for the Eagles. As far as Blankenship is concerned, I am a fan of Blankenship, and I think that he really puts up some highlight plays. That being said, I don't expect him to have a starting role on this team. Obviously, at this point in time, it seems like he is a de facto starter along with Terrell Edmonds. Again, we've talked about the team possibly adding a safety, and I think that it will be whichever safety is to be acquired by the Eagles and Edmonds starting the season. So I think Blankenship will have another good season. He will continue to grow and progress and have a few more of those highlight plays. But as far as who I feel more confident in, it's Nakobe Dean.
No, it's interesting. I'm super high on Nakobe Dean. It was actually, just a Facebook memory that popped up on my page a couple days ago. Me talking last year about how hyped I was, in the offseason that we landed Nakobe Dean. And, I know we didn't get an opportunity to flash or show much last year, but, to me, still coming out of college, he was kind of like the Cam Whitmore of last night. I can't believe it. I was just sitting there waiting. He kept dropping. The second round.
Yeah, those injury concerns, man, they'll drop you.
Pile up, I don't know what's the worst thing, to have a last second injury concern pop up before the draft, or have what was the dude, the offensive lineman that had the
Laramie Tunsil.
Laramie Tunsil. I don't know what the worst thing that pop up the day before a draft. A bad video like that, or a random injury concern at the last second that makes you drop right there.
Yeah, either one will take a lot of money out of your pocket, that's for sure.
Absolutely. But overall, as we get ready to wrap up this show, guys, here trending the AM, Philadelphia Sports Network, Zach Ciavolella with me here. Are you overall pretty confident about this Eagles team in the offseason? If nothing else happens, which we know something else is going to happen this offseason, if nothing else happens, we go into week one as we are right now. You're still pretty happy with the offseason that the Eagles put together, correct?
Yeah, I would say so. I overall pretty happy. Again, safety is a concern until it's not. But that being said, looking at this team compared to the others in the NFC East, at this point in time, I still expect the Eagles to take the NFC East. I'm not overly afraid of the Cowboys. I'll be honest. It's kind of hard to be at this point, though they are a good team, respectively. It's just not a team I'm overall worried about. But the Eagles, I think that they've done a lot of good this offseason. I can't wait to watch Jalen Carter get to work. That's my biggest thing is watching Jalen Carter in his debut. Every single preseason game that he plays, I'm going to be watching him like a hawk, because, man, that's going to be something special for sure.
Absolutely. I agree with you. All right, so a couple people have commented to get your opinion on it. On this show, I get bashed all the time by everybody because of the Kelly Green reunion that is coming out this year. And I hate Kelly Green Eagles gear. I think it is one of the most overrated things in Philadelphia sports. And everybody wants to know what you think of the Eagles Kelly Green. Am I completely insane for hating Kelly Green?
Phil, I'm sorry, but I'm not going to be able to help you out. I think the Kelly Green's a hot look. I think it's going to be really good for the Eagles. If I can ask, is it because of the lack of success, or
exactly? It connotates negative. I'm older than you. I grew up during the Buddy Ryan era. That was my first piece of football, and it was just loss after loss after loss. I was joking with my buddy from Detroit about their new jersey or their new logo for their temporary thing, and I'm like, you're going back and forth. I'm like, he didn't know I was old enough to remember Rodney Peete coming to Philly from Detroit. It's like Kelly Green to me is such a negative connotation. I hate it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you can kind of apply that argument to so many things, though. I mean, prior to 2017, you could make the case that the Midnight Green was also synonymous with losing. There obviously was playoff success during the Andy Reid era, but never enough to take home the Lombardi. So, at what point does that change? How many years do you give a team's color scheme before it's no longer an issue? And the thing that I'll say too, even if I give you that it's currently synonymous with losing, who better than Jalen Hurts to change that?
I'm just not running out and getting a Kelly Green Jalen Hurts jersey. I'm just
not doing it for sure.
Oh no,
100%. My hardest decision will be: do I go for Jalen Hurts? Do I go for AJ Brown? Do I go for Jalen Carter? Do I go for Jordan Davis? Jason Kelsey? Well, it might be Jason Kelsey. I might have just answered my own problem there, but it's going to be tough.
Yeah, I just think the Midnight Green color is better too. I mean, we got so many comments. Midnight too afraid to no, and I don't hate the powder blues of the Phillies.
The powder blue is amazing,
dude. I love the powder blue. So I'm not all about hate on this show, just so you know. And no, I did not use the word mid or drip today. I did not give you your $1 Million Man laugh today. I told you, no more $1 Million Man until that $500 super chat's dropped. Anyway, we got to wrap it up today. Trending in the AM right here on Philadelphia Sports Network. Zach, what do you got coming out? Do you got any articles in the works over there at Philadelphia Sports Network?
So definitely check out our Sixers team. We do have a piece on Philippe Patrushev coming out today. He's coming over finally for the Sixers. You'll see him in the summer league, potentially even through out the regular season. But he almost kind of like Jaden Springer almost qualifies as a draft pick. Petrushev almost qualifies as a draft pick this year as well. But really, just stay up with our Sixers coverage because this team, I'll tell you, has just come up even better and better over the past couple of years. And not even just myself, but the rest of this team. Be sure to check them out. Check out all the Philly Sports Network. Our Eagles coverage is fantastic. Our Flyers coverage. There's our Union coverage. I think is the best in the game.
Absolutely.
That's not even me being biased. That's just a fact. I think. So definitely be sure to check everything out. Follow Philly Sports Network on Twitter. Definitely check me out, Chavo NBA. One thing I do have dropping, it's not even for Philly Sports Network, but check out Hoops Habit. I will have draft grades and winners and losers from last night's draft for the entire NBA. So all my NBA junkies, that's first and second round as well. All my NBA junkies, be sure to check that out.
I don't know if you see this comment on the screen here. I'm thinking of starting the segment comment of the day. If I start that comment,
for sure,
this would win as comment of the day. Yes, I get it, Jed. I get it. I see it too. And now I'm never going to not be able to think of it when I see Zach. Thank you very much, Zach, for coming on. I know you're tired. I know you want to get another nap in. I'm sure there's more writing for you to do today. Anyway.
Oh, no naps. We got a PSN wedding today, baby. So it's a busy day. Yeah,
I forgot about that. Nick Barry, a shout out. It's wedding day.
Absolutely.
So that you're gonna need a nap, man. You
at some point
go late into the night.
At some point, yeah. I'll try. I got my coffee, all ready to go, and I'll probably just be living off that for the day.
All right, everybody, have a great day, a great weekend for Philadelphia Sports Network and Trending in the AM. I am Phil Stiefel. We will see you guys next week for Overreaction Monday, and have a great weekend, guys.